we've done too much without the expectation of other people carrying their load, right? And carrying their agreements forward and doing what we want them to do in exchange for that aid. But for us to influence things on a global basis is great. I've got no issue with that. We need to become strong as a sovereign nation first and foremost, and we've become weak as a sovereign nation by having open borders, the invasion, the lack of American values being spread within America.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Bryce Eddy. We met through Baker, which is always fun. I never know what kind of wild person he's going to send my way. So tell me, before we get into, the show and everything, let's talk about you for a minute. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California and recently fled to the great state of Idaho, and I split my time between Idaho and Nashville.
What'd you do in Southern California when you were growing up? What was it, or what part of Southern California, I guess, first?
Yeah, so just outside of LA, the Ventura County area.
Yeah, Ventura's nice. I mean, it was.
It is. It's God's country,
Yeah. And what was it like growing up there? I mean, obviously, it changed quite a bit.
Yeah, actually, man, Southern California is awesome. I mean, especially when I grew up, it was the 80s and 90s, and it was kind of a booming time before everything started to disintegrate under terrible, horrific leadership and the fast leftward move of kind of all the crazy Marxists.
Could you tell when you were younger that it was starting to change, or when do you think? When did you notice? I guess.
Yeah, so politics was kind of my sports. So I spent a lot of time as a sales guy, driving around in the car, listening to Rush Limbaugh and all those sort of things. So I was boring my friends at the time, saying that hey, there's seeds that are being planted here that are going to destroy the United States, and you better watch out. And it didn't make me popular at parties because, there was a different agenda when, kids are in, high school or college. But, I mean, you started to see what was happening pretty quick. And now, of course, all those friends are like, can you believe this? I go, yeah, I told you for 30 years.
When you say seeds were being planted, what do you mean specifically?
Well, you look at like the just the anti-men movement, the movement towards feminism. You saw kind of the nerfing of everything in life. I mean, we no more drinking out of garden hoses and staying out until the streetlights come on. All of that sort of stuff changed pretty quickly, and you saw just the little bits of that begin to affect what now became this, super kind of entitled class of people. And, we saw the fruits of that.
Yeah, you guys maybe before anybody else, although I think because of the economic power of California, it kind of blasted through it for a long time. It was like two parallel worlds going on there, where there was a big group of people making a lot of money and doing stuff, and there was a bunch of grifters doing nothing.
Yeah, and it's like living on your parents' money. It'll last a generation or two if you're a big time spender and you're wasting things and you're not producing. But eventually you run out, and we saw that in California, and that's why California's population shrunk for the first time. Lost seats in Congress. I mean, businesses have fled. I spent most of my career in the insurance business, among other things, and all of our clients started moving out of town and started, maybe living there if they could still, but moving their operations and moving their businesses and their employees to, Texas and Florida and other places.
Yeah. It's definitely odd to see the biggest state in the country lose people. And should mass deportations ever happen, they're going to lose quite a few more.
Well, if they just do what they're talking about now and actually do an accurate census and not count illegal aliens. I mean, remember, so much of what they did was import people so that they could change the landscape and gain more seats in states like California so that they could just eventually dominate the political landscape. And you'd have not just one party rule in California, but have it across the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened. I don't know, if people remember this, but it's kind of what happened with Reagan in California.
I'm not a great fan of Reagan, and a lot of people, will say, well, when Ronald Reagan was in charge, and it's like, hang on a minute, when we talk about sowing the seeds, I mean, no fault divorce, amnesty for illegal aliens, a bunch of spending that he did kind of started the period of prosperity, but eventually, you just suffer some of those decisions down the road, and we have.
Yeah, that's I've always, like, people refer to themselves as a Reagan Republican. I mean, so you mean not Republican is what you're saying?
Yeah, you're just an establishment guy. Is that what you're telling us?
Like, he tripled the debt. Banned machine guns. Amnesty for illegals.
Well, and pharma. He made it to where zero liability for them, giving us bad drugs.
Yeah, it's like, I don't. It's an interesting thing to talk to people who consider themselves conservative, because I think the words liberal, conservative are kind of like Republican and Democrat. I'm not sure they have any real meaning anymore, especially not to the people that use them.
No, that's true. And I do wish we had better labels, because, I mean, people use labels as categories, right? And it's, okay, you're in this category. All right, now I know how to treat you or think about you and all your cause. But so much of this stuff is complex. And most of it, if we were to really solve the problems that ail the United States, it's generational problems that require generational solutions. And so many of these things are, kind of layered complexity. Take healthcare, which I've been in that business forever. And it's, there's so many problems with the broken system, but there's so many things that you would have to change foundationally if you're going to eventually cure it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, our system of government operates in 4-year increments. In some cases, 2-year increments, if you talk about the House.
Yep.
And, I don't know how good of an idea that is. Certainly, I don't think the framers would have been zealots about the specific time period, right? Because the way it works in the House is, you can do your job for about 6 months and then you're back to fundraising and campaigning. So it's not a 2-year cycle. It's a 6-month cycle with an 18-month break, basically.
Yeah, I'll say something controversial as a conservative, but I think you might agree with me. If you really do understand the way Washington works, you would be against term limits. Because what happens is the staffers just have to outweight the bad or the people that are against their ideas and their policy. The bureaucracy is what lasts there. And so the staffers and the bureaucrats are the ones that are ultimately running things. So if you get elected to Congress, you come in, and I know several congressmen, both former and present, and if you walk into that job, all of a sudden all these handlers come in that are permanent Washington folks. They then tell you, oh, here's what you need to vote on. Here's what this bill says. They kind of download to you everything. And then you either do it or, they, eventually try to primary you, get you out of there, get you set up on something controversial, and bounce you out if you're not playing the game. And they've got a million different ways to do that. And so unless we fix the bureaucracy, which I think it needs to be broken up, and you need to kind of cast DC's departments all over the country where they make sense, so that you force those lobbyists to get on planes, and travel, and you get people who are, invested in the community. It won't change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see as far as term limits for Congress go, I think that's just kind of a catch-all in a lot of ways for people that don't understand politics. Yeah, I think I would like a top level term limit, I think that would make sense, to be honest. But yeah, the bureaucrats are certainly the bigger issue. I mean, the same people that were, if somebody like Ted Cruz, for example, were to run for president, the same people that were the staffers for George W. Bush would be on his staff.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. And that was Trump's problem. So Trump didn't have that Rolodex. Right. So in his first term, he came in and he was given all of these people and given all these recommendations. And he's assuming that, OK, they're going to follow his direction and we can run this like a business. And all those folks were, OK, hey, we're going to just passively resist him, or we're going to, actively oppose him internally. And it's the permanent Washington issue that we've got to get rid of.
Well, what would you do about that? I mean, term limits on staffers?
No, I would literally let's put the Department of the Interior into the Interior. Let's put the Department of Agriculture where there's actual agriculture. Let's break up DC so that they're not this cabal that all work hand in hand, that trade jobs all the time. Oh, I moved over here, over here, over here. Put them in the communities that they serve. You have to figure out how to decentralize things. I mean, the people that we are against, and I'm assuming you and I are on the same page, are the people that want global control over everything, right? They're the central authority types. They want to control it all. And centralization is our enemy. We're seeing it in business. We're seeing it everywhere. When you have, 2 or 3 companies controlling every single industry, we have no choice. We have no liberty. We have no freedom. When you have 2 or 3 companies controlling most of the media, we have no control. We have no liberty. So what we need to do is decentralize everything. And that was what our founding fathers did intend. But the nature of mankind is to, over time, accumulate power. And so we have to kind of actively figure out how to put bulwarks against that.
Yeah, I would say it can be difficult to determine who is and is not an actual conservative based on what they say, because these people are all full of shit, frankly.
Yeah, 100%.
But there is a decent litmus test, and it's decentralization. Anyone who is, by word or deed, trying to accumulate power for themselves or for the government, that's not, in no meaningful way is that conservative. That's not how that works.
Correct.
So, Republicans have presided over the largest expansion of the federal government in history, which is DHS. It added, I think at the time it was 160,000 new government jobs. And then by the end of Obama's term, it was like 230,000. So he increased it another 70. So, there's nothing conservative about that. And we're getting close to having it happen again. I'm not sure how I really feel about it yet. This expansion of immigration is, to me, a mistake. I don't think it should be happening. I think there's a tool in the tool belt called the Insurrection Act, which Trump could very easily deploy right now. Activate National Guard troops to supplement immigration, and that's a temporary solution to a temporary problem. We tend to create permanent solutions to temporary problems, and they persist. And then what happens with government power is it goes out looking for a problem to solve that doesn't exist, and it interferes in the lives of American citizens, which I think is completely out of the question. Like, that cannot be allowed. So, this is the thing that the average voter that is meant to hold these people accountable just doesn't understand. They don't understand these finer points, unfortunately, of politics, because they think if you hit these 4 or 5 bullet points, that makes you conservative. But I'm looking down the list of the actions of these people, and spending keeps growing, and taxes, every now and again, they'll throw you a bone and cut taxes for a couple years. But that is meaningless to me unless spending goes down.
Oh, I agree. I mean, that is the issue, and we're still moving, fast off the cliff or into the iceberg, whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't matter really who's in charge. They're just saying different things, speaking to a different audience, but they're most of them are doing the same thing. And I'm not excited about the big beautiful bill, although there are some things and some mechanisms in there that We need to examine that could be good, but the truth is it's a continued expansion of government, and I'm not keen on that. It's interesting because for guys who really do want liberty, right, which is God's idea, not man's idea. But for those of us that really truly want liberty, we don't want to just switch our masters from a left-wing master to a right-wing master. And that's a concept right now that people are pushing back on. You might have heard Dr. James Lindsay, who's a good buddy of mine.
Yeah, James is a friend of mine.
Yeah, he's getting excoriated all over the place. He went on my show talking about the woke right, and I agree with him. And I think that because he's so smart, and the way he talks about certain things, people get pissed, and they don't understand that what he's saying is absolutely true. We didn't sign on to the movement of freedom to just have a right-wing group of authoritarians in charge of us. And that's what a lot of people are now advocating is, okay, we have power. Let's expand this power and use it to defeat our enemies versus let's decentralize this power so that, the family and the individual can grow and become strong, and small businesses can become strong, and all the things that really do put, power in the hands of the middle class and the folks that should have it and should be able to make their decisions, But yeah, instead you're just seeing these folks argue for the idea of a authoritarian style Christian nationalism. And by the way, I'm Christian and I'm a nationalist. I believe in sovereignty. So that statement alone doesn't bother me. But there are people there that want to wield that power to also lord it over me, and I'm not interested.
Yeah, it's if you happen upon a weapon that the other side has been using and your instinct is to take control of it and use it as well, I think that's probably a bad instinct in this.
It's like the
politics,
one ring of power.
Yeah.
We got these guys that are like, ooh, now I've got the ring.
Yeah.
Okay, settle down.
I think the Republican move would be to destroy the weapon and then try to destroy the means of acquiring another one. That would be the smart move, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, again, the purpose of decentralization is to return as much power to the individual as possible. Now, it's not on the flip side of this, you've got a lot of and they cozy up from time to time, these people, depending on the issue. But the libertarian crowd likes to. They live in a utopian fantasy, in my opinion, right?
Correct.
So it's like you can tell,
just like the socialists do.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of idea. It's a fantasy world.
Yeah, just keep I like Murray Rothbard and the stuff he talked about with individualism and different ways of minimizing the impact of government. I think it's really smart. But if you talk to somebody that is a libertarian long enough, they will just describe government, but in their own words, which is really funny to me because, it's like, oh, we don't want government of this, including anarcho-capitalist people, so on the far side of libertarianism. But they'll say things like, well, we'll just, identify some people in the community to handle that. I'm like, sorry, what? I mean, you just described what government is, my friend. Now, certainly keeping it as small as possible and decentralized should be the goal. But, there's a baby with the bathwater scenario going on there. And I just think I think it's an untenable fantasy because the vast majority of people won't do it. If you want to be a straight up anarcho-capitalist libertarian, you can find a place to do that, I'm sure, right? Somalia, maybe. And you can live that life, and that's fine. I mean, it's your right to try to do that, but the vast majority of people don't want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and politics, by its simplest definition, is just how we organize ourselves, and we have to organize ourselves. I mean, we can't really have anarchy, and we can't really have total chaos. And they argue that, well, no, certain things will, kind of work themselves out. But we do have to have government. But the smallest form of government that I want to be the strongest is the family. And, next up, I mean, was the concept that, Jethro told Moses, right? You've got the family, the individual, we need to be self-governing, the family, the community, and only the biggest problems go up to the biggest level of government. And you have to have that be very, very narrow in scope. Because, you're not going to have worldwide anarchy. You are going to have other governments like China. You mentioned, hey, we got, 4-year cycle here. China understands and looks at things in 100-year cycles, right? They look at it multi-generationally. And that is what causes us problems is we don't understand, and those, far libertarian anarchist types don't get that, we live in a world that is filled with evil and competing notions of how we should do things. So you've got to figure out something that works within that context.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the other part of that is the non-interventionalists, which I understand. I mean, I went to war, and I'm not keen on doing it for no reason, for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't want my buddies going for no reason, or other people's kids, husbands and whatnot. So, yeah, I get it. But we also, at some point, you've got to, you have to consult with reality at some point, right? And the reality is that China's current proxies are Iran and all of its proxies, so Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi, etc. Pakistan, Myanmar, pretty much all the Central Asian stands, except for, I think, 2. North Korea, and is to a large degree partnered with Russia. So I guess the question I would pose to people, well, that's one set of facts. And the second set of facts is, what do you think the likelihood is that we're actually going to close ourselves off from all of these places completely without any shipping or manufacturing or trade deals or travel or any of that stuff? Are we going to just close off North America and that be the end of it and not deal with anybody else? Because that's an option, right? But what do you think do you think that's realistic? So those are the facts. And then the question is, what is the U.S. to do about that? Are they to develop and maintain proxies to spread Westernism as well? Are they to do nothing and close ourselves off? If nothing, I guess the question I would pose to people is, are you comfortable with a world where China's culture and ideology dominates? And at what point would that cross a line? Like, if they brought it to Canada and Mexico, would that cross a line, or did it have to be in the United States? And at what point is it okay to fight back against it? Those are the questions I have for people that are isolationists. Because for me, I'm more of a Monroe Doctrine guy. Regional hegemony has worked pretty well over time. Our big problem right now is that Europe won't do what the fuck they're supposed to do. They're just lazy and stupid about it, and they're being invaded by Muslims right now. But that's not our problem, to be honest, and we shouldn't be getting involved in that. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great subject because, obviously there's the idea of foreign aid, which, I've talked about, with folks. I talked about it with Baker, and there's a certain amount of interventioning that we do. There is a certain amount of things that we need to be involved in, right? My argument is we've done too much without the expectation of other people carrying their load, right? And carrying their agreements forward and doing what we want them to do in exchange for that aid. But for us to influence things on a global basis is great. I've got no issue with that. We need to become strong as a sovereign nation first and foremost, and we've become weak as a sovereign nation by having open borders, the invasion, the lack of American values being spread within America. We started in the 1960s, and it was Teddy Kennedy's fault, but we changed our immigration philosophy to one that was very much oriented around immigration is to make us strong. It's not for the immigrant. Now, there's a certain amount of actual asylum seekers and people that need to be rescued, and being a Christian, principally Christian nation, we've got to do that, right? But what we did was we started just letting anybody in without an expectation that they were here to participate in this grand American experiment and share our values, and they were here to become Americans. We stopped that in the 60s, and you've seen what's happened in the kind of degrading over time of what it means to be an American and what it means to be a patriot. And that's why you've got all these people waving, Palestinian flags in the streets, is because we stopped, having people first and foremost identify as Americans and bring the best of their culture here. I mean, we do want great food, and we wanted the Italians and their pastas and all of the things that or Mexicans and their tacos, and we want to import the best of other people's cultures and have them be free to have that identity, but the American identity, first and foremost. And so, we lost that. But if we become a strong sovereign nation again, then, we're dealing with the world from a tremendous position of strength. And then we can do the things that we need to do to, keep the world a good place. Because I'm not against war. I don't want us to be fighting endless wars that make people wealthy, but there is a time for war and there's a time for peace. I mean, when going after Iran to help, create the opportunity for a positive Iranian revolution where, Prince Reza and people who want to see it back to what it was pre the Ayatollah, there's ways that we can support that. And there's ways that we can take them, down a notch or two, and I'm for that. But just wholesale shipping our soldiers over there is not a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think the best use of American military power American institutional power is not military power. It's certainly good to have that in your back pocket, right? The most advanced military in the history of the world, and by the way, quite experienced at this point. Whereas, a lot of people talk about China and Russia. Russia has shown themselves to be a paper tiger, which, from the outset of these things, I've always said that, like that military and their economy just cannot keep up with us. Reagan proved that during the rollback period. By the time H.W. Bush took office, all he had to do was kind of like nudge them, and it was over, right? It was more about identifying who in power over there would lead a successful drawdown, and it turned out to be Gorbachev, obviously. But it's the military. By the way, China is untested completely. They have no shot at any kind of conflict with us. I don't know why I know they got a lot of people, but so did Persia. You know what I mean?
It's like, they can throw bodies at the problem, but that's not enough.
No, it's not going to work. But the real impact that certainly, I think about World War II era and post. The impact of the United States was to certainly come in, and people like Bill Knudsen amplifying our ability to build airplanes helped us win in Germany and Japan, especially in the Pacific theater. So our military might helped, but the reason that Japan is, I think, the third largest economy in the world now is because of our plan to rebuild their economy. The reason that Europe had such a strong economy for so long is because of the Marshall Plan and us allowing them to essentially, our economy was so strong, they were able to leach off of it for decades.
Yeah, I mean, we were the big brother paying the bill. Yeah, I mean, that's what's really happened to us. And, we need to have expectations.
Yeah. Well, we're not good at that. And it's not just because of the a lot of people will blame it on the 4-year cycles, but Clinton allowed China into the World Trade Organization with no caveats at all, which is one of the biggest mistakes in foreign policy history, in my opinion. But back to this, American soft power is the most important thing. And and I'll explain what it is for the crowd here, but it can't, the first thing to remember is that it cannot happen unless we have a robust economy of our own. That's the only way that we can export our economy, is if it's good. Otherwise, we're exporting bullshit to people. So it's been used Foreign aid has been used to fund all sorts of nonsense over the years. Certainly we all know that now. If you didn't know before, you certainly know now. And I like that. Like, I think Rubio is a bit of a neocon, but I like how he's brought this to heel. I think he was the perfect person for that job. I said that from the outset. He fucking hates China. He doesn't play that bullshit. He wants to end their like meddling, which I think is really good, but has brought USAID to heel, and maybe we'll return it to what it's actually supposed to do, which is kind of a quasi foreign policy intelligence asset, right, to benefit America globally. But there's different ways that foreign aid can and should be used in line with what we call an America First agenda. It's like, it comes down to what Rubio said a couple months ago, which is that it's foreign aid, not foreign charity, right? Like
right.
The purpose is to help you up, not to put you on the tit for the rest of your life, which is what we did to Europe. Japan moved on and did their thing, although the tariff thing still had to get sorted out, but Japan built a huge economy. One of the ways we know terrorists are recruited is through hopelessness and poverty. It's the same thing as gang members and stuff like that. This same form of nihilism breeds. So we've been able to take countries like Bahrain, for example, who would have been ripe for terrorist recruitment, and pushed something this way or that way. Same with Jordan, pushed something this way or that way, helped them out a little bit financially. And now they have not only robust economies in both countries, but they also have leadership who are like, we're not fucking doing that. We want to make money. And the best example is probably Saudi Arabia. Like, we could have nuked Saudi Arabia in 2001. We had the right to do that, in my opinion. But instead, we made a deal with them that you're going to knock this shit off. You're going to tell us who the terrorists are. You're going to help us fucking with intelligence in that region. And in exchange for that, we're not going to nuke you off the face of the earth. And they agreed to it. And as a result of that, we had economic ties with them. And a leader, MBS, stepped up and said, you know what? We want to be taken seriously as a country. We want to advance into modernity. Whatever you think of the guy, he's desperately trying to drag that country into modernity right now. And that's the result of American soft power. We didn't invade. Yeah. We didn't invade Saudi Arabia, right? We didn't do that. We didn't need to. All we did was offer them the carrot, and they knew the stick existed, right? And I think that's the thing that we need to be focusing on right now. And Trump, even in his first term, was doing that with the Abraham Accords. The fact that this guy hasn't gotten the fucking Nobel Peace Prize is bananas to me.
Well, there's two major worldwide illnesses, and the Trump derangement syndrome and Israeli derangement syndrome right now, where it doesn't matter what he does, it's going to be viewed poorly. He could come out with the cure for cancer tomorrow, and they'd argue why it was bad for us. I mean, He's done a pretty phenomenal job on many things, and that is the reality of it. And I think he'll continue to, even if there's some things that I disagree with and don't like. If you're game, I would love to talk about what I think the worst thing that's happening in the world stage right now, and you touched on it earlier, and that is there is a Islamic invasion, worldwide. And that I've been talking about for years is the real battle. Communism and socialism and all of that stuff is there, and it's there to weaken us.
Well, communism and socialism is like, I don't even know what you would call it. That's the train that the global caliphate is riding to invade our countries.
Yeah, I call it the sales pitch.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Because you've got two people that are using that sales pitch. You've got the globalists, right, that are selling the college kids on, hey, life is not fair, and we should, really redistribute wealth, more equally. And then you've got like this, future mayor of New York City that's an avowed communist, but the truth is they are using it to weaken New York so that there can be a wholesale invasion of Islam into New York City, and you're going to see what's happened to a lot of our great European cities.
This episode of Citizen is brought to you by our title sponsor, Omaha Steaks, best steaks in the business, the oldest butcher in America, America's original butcher since 1917. A family-owned company with 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. And look, they've got everything: mouth-watering burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, and even desserts. They got some sides on there too. You know how I feel about sides, but they have them. Grass-fed, grain-finished beef has more marbling for exceptional flavor and is the choice of steakhouses and professional chefs around the world. There's nothing quite like the unforgettable taste of a summer cookout. And as the summer heats up, the blazing hot sale is the perfect time to stock up and save on exceptional handcrafted flavor and convenience. Make your summer sizzle with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their blazing hot sale. And for an extra $45 off, use the promo code CITIZEN at checkout. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $45 off with the promo code CITIZEN at checkout. See site for details. And it's not just for you. It can be given as a gift as well. I've given a couple of gifts over the last couple of weeks of this. It's an easy stocking stuffer during the holidays, but even birthdays and all the things that come up during your life where you want to do something nice for somebody, for your dad, for the man in your life, or to make your wife's life easier by having a constant supply of meat coming to the house so she doesn't have to do all that grocery shopping, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is. Go to omahasteaks.com to get 50% off site-wide during their blazing hot sale. Use the promo code CITIZEN at checkout for an additional $45 off. Minimum purchase may apply. See site for details. And a big thanks to our advertiser, Omaha Steaks. This episode is also brought to you by First Form, firstform.com/Drinking Bros, the best protein in the business. Protein is the building block of life, folks. I say it all the time. You replace every cell in your body over the course of 2 to 10 years, depending on how active you are, how much you eat, and how clean you eat. And if you're replacing it with garbage, you're going to be garbage. So make sure you're eating the best possible protein you can and supplementing with First Form. Don't forget about the micro factors. It's just a little simple pack. Open it up, dump it in your mouth hole, and feel better. You know, they've got the liver detox, which is a great thing for people that like to drink or people who, just want to be healthier. And then they have all these other supplements. They've got great pre-workouts. They've got great protein in all the flavors. And then, of course, for people on the go like us, they have exceptional meat sticks, protein sticks, and a variety of different flavors. And then the level 1 protein bars in a variety of flavors as well. That we talk about this stuff all the time. They're great. So go to firstform.com/Drinking Bros. It's the best company in the world. You've seen us with Andy. You've seen the company. We love these guys. It's a very American company. So go support them and support us. Firstform.com/Drinking Bros. That's OneStPHORM.com/Drinking Bros. Yeah, I think that's just right. And just for historical context, Islam just happens to be where certain factions of Christianity were 1,000 years ago, right? It's got a very medieval bend to it, and they haven't grown the fuck up, right? Like this is one of the things I love talking about, to be honest, because if you track the Reformation of Christianity over the last, let's say, what year is this? Over the last 800 years, right? You could call it the Protestantism or whatever. It doesn't matter to me, because I think it got back into the Catholic Church as well. I don't think there's any functional difference with regard to this platform or with regard to this tenet anymore. But if you track through like the northern governors in England demanding the Magna Carta in order to defend England against France with King John, that's a good starting point. A couple hundred years later, you get the Levelers talking about or writing the Agreement of the People, which is kind of a fundamental basis of our Constitution. Several hundred years later, you get people like Locke defining property rights as a natural right that government doesn't give you anything, right? All it does is help you to manage existential threats. That's what it does. It doesn't grant you anything. And then Montesquieu talking about the separation of powers to keep it decentralized. This all tracks along with the Reformation period of Christianity, in my opinion. Yep. And so, I think you're right. Christianity growing up over the last 800 years and finding a way to both stay solid in your faith, but recognize that you can't force it on anybody, and that these things that you praise God for giving you, you should be You should be taking care of them, not trying to force them on people, right? Be a good steward of the gifts you've been given. That growing up period is side by side with the liberty movement in human history. Free speech, liberty, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
So it didn't happen in Islam. It happened in small pockets, right? There are places where it happened. Jordan,
well, I don't think it can happen in Islam.
It's going to be tough, right? I mean, so
because it's their orthodoxy is against it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. That's the difference. There's like there's no compelled speech or thought, which are the same thing, by the way. Speech and thought are the same thing. There's no compelled speech or thought in Christianity. There is, unfortunately, I don't know, like scripturally, it's not necessarily true. There is some, it depends on where you're reading, but the Quran also says that you can't force somebody to believe, right? But then it says you can kill disbelievers. So that's like kind of
I mean, it again, it was written by man, not God, right? Or demons. I mean, it is a top-down religion, not a bottom-up, which is what Christianity is. And Christianity can look different on its surface. It adapts to cultures. In other words, right? The way that the Chinese underground church expresses Christianity is going to be different than it's expressed here in America. Although it's the same tenets of the faith, it's the same core, all that stuff. It's going to, adapt to each culture to a certain extent because it is that grassroots, ground up. Islam top down. Look at every Islam country, and they're all going to eventually look the same based on their orthodoxy, and their real central message is. We're a religion of peace until we get enough of a critical mass to, force our way. And then once we get to be a dominant group, then it's, convert, pay up, or die. And those are really only the three choices. And we've been fighting that here in America since the Barbary Pirates.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't see the utility in, like I've got friends from the Middle East and other countries who are Muslim, and they think of themselves as American first, right? And Islam is something they practice as a cultural thing, but they're American. Like they came here to get away from the bullshit, right?
Right.
And I'm perfectly happy with that. But I think en masse, these multiculturalism just doesn't work. It's just, I mean, why would it? Why? I don't know why we would expect that to work. Why should a bunch of people with different sets of intrinsic values be able to get along?
No, it's incompatible with the West. It's incompatible with the culture that we've established, which is why you're seeing right now what's happening in Texas. They are working very, very hard to establish their own communities, which will end up being no-go zones and their own nations within our nation, which is not healthy for us and will further destabilize us and allow them to do that even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
and again, I've got Muslim friends, and I've discussed this stuff with them, and at the core, many of them won't disagree with my positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you ask a Persian person who fled Iran how they feel about a theocracy. Yeah. Just ask them. I promise you, you're not going to get support for the regime over there.
Correct.
It's just not going to happen. It's and that's what we're looking for. America's supposed to be the shining light, right? That's we're supposed like, hey, no matter what you believe, if you respect other people, you can come here and be successful. That's the message, right? America is the simple idea that individual liberty and personal entrepreneurship are the ultimate inoculation to this tyrannical bullshit that we see all around the world for all of human history. And people from these countries look at that and say, fuck yeah. Like I can't change my circumstances, but I can work my ass off. Only like nobody can stop me from doing that. And if I do it there, I can succeed. And that's when America was great. When we got the kind of immigrant who thought, I can come here, work hard, and succeed. Not the kind who thought, I can come here and leech off the government, which is what we're getting now, unfortunately.
Exactly. And again, that
and I
goes
hate
back
that.
to that
I hate that
change.
for the immigrants too. That's the thing that really makes me angry. Aside from just the invasion of my country, sorry to cut you off, but it makes me so fucking mad. Two things. One, that we ruined that for the world over the last 40 years. That's a big part of it. Well, 60, I guess. We ruined that for the world. And two, what's been happening the last, let's say, 10 years or so, these people that escape Guatemala and Venezuela and previously El Salvador and places like that, who that asshole down the block has been harassing and threatening to kill them their whole lives, right? Their whole lives. And they come here to work their ass off because they think America's going to be better for them. And then we let that same asshole into this country. And now he's down the block from them again. Like, what kind of country does that make us? How is that ethical?
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. And you know what's interesting? And I have a take that's somewhat controversial, maybe. But we'll see if you agree. So I think, you know, that we made a mistake with our kind of unfettered asylum program, because there are very few true asylum seekers, right? We have a lot of people who would like to come here and would like to come here for a better way of life. And that's understandable. And I do think that we need to create a much easier path for those hardworking folks that want to do that. But if you're importing all of the young military-aged men here under the guise of asylum, you know, you're importing the third world. You get the third world. And the truth is those folks should be kind of forced to stay behind to clean up their own culture. Because the only people that can are the young military-aged fighting males that can actually, you know, bring a bad culture to heal. You know, they have to have the will to do it, and they have to have the values to do it. But that's where some of our foreign aid, that's where some of our exporting of some of the healthy aspects of our ideals can help them to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got something great, your instinct should be to share it with other people, right? That's fair. So you live in a neighborhood. I've got a giant dual fire Rectex smoker, and I'm going to make 3 or 4 briskets this weekend if I feel like it. You can't stop me because this is America, bitch. But I get pretty excited about meat too.
I love it.
Yeah. Maybe I make food for everybody, right? But if I say, hey, to the neighborhood, hey, everybody come over, I got a bunch of smoked meat, we're going to have a good time, and somebody comes over trying to start shit with people or trying to rearrange my house or wearing muddy shoes, fuck off. Like, that's not how this is done. There's I guess you could call it a quid pro quo with every relationship. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily transactional, but the purpose of it is to show mutual respect. That's what this country is founded on, right? So I'm not going to come into your country and tell you what to do. I think these Westerners that go into Muslim countries and act like assholes and get kidnapped or arrested or fucking killed for it, what were you thinking, dude?
Yeah, no
like, what exactly did you expect to happen? And now, because people will be like, well, America should do, like, America did something. They made America. You could have fucking stayed here and not gone there. That, like, it's not our job to come pick you up because you jumped out of a moving car, dude.
Yeah. No, it's true. By the way, your comments, you know, what got Arnold Schwarzenegger in trouble on The View.
Oh, yeah.
He said that same thing. You know?
Yeah. How about that? How about an immigrant that actually appreciates this country, sitting around a bunch of women who don't?
Yeah, no, it was wild to see Whoopi Goldberg not get the answer that she wanted. Yeah. No, it was fun. Well, I mean, I agree. We've got an issue with this here, and the fundamental issue that we've lost or we're not keeping in mind is there will be a religious ideology that reigns supreme in every single nation on earth, and that's just the way we are as human beings. The people who believe that we don't have that here, or the separation of church and state and, you know, all of that is what they want. The truth is secular humanism just became the religion, or, you know, other ideals just became their religion, and there is no better religion to reign supreme than Christianity. And because of its design with that ground up approach, you have the freedom to choose. You're not forced to, but, you know, our ideals in Christianity are going to protect people who disagree with us. And there's no other place that is true. There's no other religion that's true, including secular humanism, which is why you saw over the last decade here, cancel culture and, Christians being, shut down, and, the lacking of freedom of speech for us. I had somebody on my show, Nick Wojcik, on my show yesterday talking about, the banking world. We were being shut down. He lost all of his Chase bank accounts because they didn't like his religious ideology. And, I got shut down on some things because I spoke out against putting kids on puberty blockers. And only secular humanism, is the reason why.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, like, I'm not, though I did go to seminary, I'm not particularly religious myself, but I will say that what you said before is we need, like, politics is a way of organizing ourselves. And I think we, not just in politics, but socially, we need that as well, right? It's part
Correct.
of our identity. And I consider myself to be a follower of Jesus, right? Like, Christianity as a religion isn't something that I'm particularly interested in, but that man
I get
that man is something that I'm interested in, because I think whether he was a real person or not, I don't think it matters. I think that that's the best story of a human being that's ever been written. And I could run you through all the reasons why corruption in government and the church, which partly the church, the Pharisees and Sadducees were the government to a large degree, so it's kind of one and the same, but they were selling off their birthright and their power to Rome. They were selling off to the criminal gangs inside of Jerusalem at the time, which nobody ever talks about this for some reason. I think it's just kind of it's lost on the story of Jesus. And then you look at the way that he treated people. It wasn't based on their character, or I'm sorry, it wasn't based on their identity. It was based on their character. This person that had a shady past, like Matthew was a tax collector in Jerusalem, which would have essentially been a Roman agent collecting revenue, essentially, right? Because the Herodian government was a vassal of Rome. It's like, he would not have been a very popular person, but he is disciple number 6, I think, something like that, or apostle number 6. Mary Magdalene has a shady past. He's like, I don't care about that. What are you doing now? That's what mattered to him. And then you look at stories like, one of the most misunderstood stories, I think, is the Good Samaritan. If you ask the average Christian what that means, they'll tell you that it means to be kind to your neighbor and to strangers, right? What they don't know is that Judea and Samaria are sworn enemies in the same way that Israel and Palestine are now, right? So that would be effectively like a Palestinian, like a Jew getting hurt on the side of the road in Israel, and a bunch of other Jews walking by not helping him, and then a Palestinian walks up and helps him. That's what the story is, right? So it tells you that your principles of being a good human being and accountable to your faith, to your God or whatever, is more important than your identity, right? Than who you think you are. And that's the most powerful message to me in all of human history.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, I've got my problems with religious, organizations and churches and all that stuff too. So I get that. I mean, I was a, preacher's kid. And,
that'll do it.
We've got our own allergies to a lot of that stuff because of what we've seen,
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do it. I grew up in the church too. And it's not like, when we say the church, I think when Jesus said it, and when Peter said it, and when Paul said it, they didn't mean what we think it means, frankly, right? They mean the body. I mean, I guess Peter later on referred to the body of Christ. That's what it is, right? By the body of Christ, I don't mean the sacrament. I mean the full body, the human beings that are, part of that whole situation.
It's the collective fellowship of believers. Yeah. No, I agree, and it's here in America, especially with the Protestant evangelical movement, we've got this kind of American view of this lens that we're looking at all of this through, and that's where we end up having so many of these doctrinal issues and arguments and all that stuff, and the oppression that occurs in a lot of these church communities, and a lot of that is just not healthy.
No, it's not, and it takes it takes leadership. You mentioned the rise of humanism, and people thought a lot of it is just contrarianism. I want to do something different than what the past was, or it's easy.
And I'm rejecting my parents' ideals.
Yeah, and a lot of it was Marxist infiltration as well, like trying to make being an American not cool, trying to be a white man, a Christian, or a man in general, or whatever, right? All these things are kind of been under attack. But this idea that we were going to move to a post-religious society, I'm sorry, fucking find one in all of human history. Like that's just not a thing, man.
You know, you're going to have a religious ideology reign supreme in every single culture, even if it is just that secular humanism or something else. It always will. And again, we're cruising to a battle where Islam is going to be reigning supreme in most of these European nations at the rate that we're seeing it right now. You know, when you have the mayor of London, you've got the mayors in Canada, you've got, you know, all of this is happening so fast, and we are essentially at a flat birth rate, you know, here in America and in the West. You know, we're going to be dominated unless we you know, start having some major change.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's this idea of a religious vacuum to me is just one of the biggest misunderstandings of foreign policy, especially in the 1900s. I reject the idea that atheism killed 100 million people in the 1900s, because I don't believe atheism is even a thing. I think people find a religion, no matter what it is, or a belief system. Agreed. And Russia had a religion, China had a religion, Korea had a religion, and the religion was the state and their dear leaders. That's what. Here's the problem with that, right?
The state is God.
Yeah, here's the problem with that. The 10 Commandments are written in stone, right? And the teachings of Jesus are very simple in the red text in the early part of the New Testament. You can follow that stuff, right? Those are things that exist as intrinsic to the human experience and immutable traits that a good person would have. If you allow an entity or a single person to dictate what is and isn't good, then good changes over time, and good does not change over time. We may discover ways to be better at being good, but goodness doesn't change. That is always the same. And this is a warning to people who are, I guess, like me, who are not particularly religious. You will find a belief system to guide your life. I promise you will.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got to be really careful about insulating yourself from this nihilistic bullshit that puts your faith in human beings. Because, look, I mean, all politicians suck. There's not a good one, in my opinion. I
can count the ones I trust on one hand.
Yeah, I don't agree with him on anything foreign policy wise, but I like Thomas Massey, even though he hates me, because anytime he says something crazy about foreign policy, I tell him to shut the fuck up. But I like guys who are authentic. He's authentic. Rand Paul's authentic.
Aren't in just to accumulate power for themselves, or they're owned by someone. And Thomas Massey, and again, I've got foreign policy disagreements and other things that I disagree with him on. But he's authentic and he's trustworthy. And I think
Rand Paul is the same. Yeah. I think Chip Roy's pretty good. There's a couple of guys that aren't just like trying to build fiefdoms.
You can count them on one hand.
That's the problem, right? It's the what do you call it? The exception that proves the rule. The fact that out of these 538 people, I can count on one hand how many people are legitimate actors.
Well, listen, I've watched guys who I believed to be fairly authentic at the beginning get corrupted. Crenshaw is one of them.
Yeah.
I spent a great deal of time drinking whiskey with him, and and at the beginning, I think he was a guy that was sharing of values, and then got kind of taken over by the financial machine.
Yeah, and I think some of it is some folks have a patrician mindset. Military officers are definitely among that group for the most part. I've got really close friends who are who are currently and were military officers, and obviously are not like that. People like my old company commander, Will Kanda, is an amazing person. My old platoon leader, Colin Great, is an amazing person. General CD, Chris Donahue, former commander of 18th Airborne Corps, an amazing human being, right? Don't think like that at all. They're the way they think is that I'm in power and I'm in a position to be a conduit of all the good things, institutional knowledge, benefits, whatever it is, down to my men. That's what they think. Instead of I'm the proprietor of these things and I dole them out to people as I see fit, which is a patrician mindset, right? And I think, unfortunately, difficult to test for that on the campaign trail, right? It's like, are you a person who is trying to be a conduit to rights, or are you a person that's trying to dole out rights? Because I think one of those is in conflict with the American experience.
Yeah. I am going to steal that from you, patrician mindset, because I think you are capturing that idea well. But by the way, I think it's the entirety of the Democrat Party towards the black community. We're gonna tell you what's best for you, and we're gonna pat you on the head, vote for us, and we're gonna give you stuff. It's that same kind of mindset that infects a lot of the uniparty folks, the establishment folks, the permanent Washington folks. It's kind of the dominant ideology there. We know best. We went to the right schools. We got elected to these positions. We're going to tell you what we're going to do.
Yeah. Meanwhile, all of our best innovators dropped out of all these schools. Right?
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, come on now. You can't you could have made that argument in the 1950s maybe, but since Gates and Jobs and Musk and all of these other people, you just can't make that argument anymore, right?
Yep. Agreed.
Which is again the power of American entrepreneurship. There are two main things I think that battle against government tyranny, the primary things. One is personal entrepreneurship, and that is a function of liberty. And the other one is comedy and satire, just making fun of these people and combining those two where, just the example I just made, where you guys thought you were all smart and cool, but these dudes who are like actually smart decided they didn't need your little fucking circus and just went off and were successful and made the country better as well.
Yeah, that's why there's no comedy on the left. Now, there's funny liberal comedians and people who, are more liberal in their mindset, but there's no one on the hardcore left that's funny. I mean, even when they tried to do comedy, guys like Trevor Noah, who's distinctly one of the most unfunny guys on the planet, he was installed in that position, and the only thing that they can do is, use mockery, which isn't generally funny, and
it's not clever either.
No, it's not, and you don't see great Russian comedy scene, or you don't in any of these other areas outside of the United States. Generally, you just don't have it because their cultures won't allow it because it's subversive.
Yeah, I mean that's the point, though, right? To be subversive. Which is
it's a free speech issue. I can mock anyone I want to in a funny way, not a Trevor Noah way.
Yeah.
I can poke fun at our government. I can poke fun at institutions. I can I can fire arrows at sacred cows.
I mean, what's the old saying? Sacred cows make the best burgers, I think, something like that. I don't remember who said it, maybe Bill Hicks or somebody like that. But yeah, they're to your point from before, even the most liberal of liberal of Muslim countries that we work with, Jordan, still it's criminal to insult the king, right? Yeah. It's like that's probably not a great idea, dude. I like King Abdullah, and his kid is going to be a good king as well. They're good people. But that seems unnecessary. If you're a good man, that's unnecessary, frankly, right? Yeah. So whatever. You don't see it. I don't think it's illegal in Israel, from what I understand. As a matter of fact, Israel has Muslim people in their government, which is not something that you hear about a lot for some reason. I can't imagine why you don't hear about that.
Yeah, no, because it goes against the kind of established I mean, look, I've never seen Jew hatred rise like we're seeing now amongst even people that were, and I would still consider, friends of mine that have gotten swallowed up by all that, to where they have taken everything that was they consider everything that Israel does or says as propaganda, and then everything that Palestine or Gaza does as truth and fact.
The Gazan health ministry or whatever. It's like,
yeah, there's an absolute problem there.
There's 3 million people in Gaza. Like 30 million people got killed today. You're like, all right, slow down, bud. Like we could do math. You got to calm down.
Yeah, it's wild to see that, and it's made guys like comedian, quote unquote, Dave Smith, famous, and yet he's lost all of his funny bone, which I find interesting.
Yeah, and then I guess the truly ironic part about that is the principle of charity, which is where you're to take people at their best possible meaning, actually comes from a first century Jewish historian. Like he coined the phrase, and nobody seems to apply it anymore. I think it's a really important thing. I talk about this a lot, especially with people like yourself who are deep into politics and have been for a long time, because there is this tendency to get entrenched in your own position. And to some degree, you should have roots. There's no question about that. And your fundamentals.
Or just know why you believe what you believe.
You should know.
Which most people don't.
It's just like your math teacher made you show the work so they could see where the problem was. And you as an individual should show your work, because what if you or somebody else identifies a problem in your logic? You're like, oh, shit, I've got to update this now. Because in the same way that America is meant to be a more perfect union over time, we are meant to be more perfect people over time, right? That is the pursuit that we're in. And I tell people this a lot. Even when you're debating other people, you've got to get people, you have to, and you can't always do it, but you try to narrow them down into their actual core belief and see if you can find some agreement. So the best example that I think that I usually use is with healthcare. People on the left will say, I think we should have free healthcare. And my brain is like, well, there's no such thing as free, obviously, right? Yeah. And don't call it a human right, because nothing that requires somebody else's labor is a human right. That's not true.
Absolutely
right?
correct.
But what they're actually saying, and this comes from an empathetic standpoint, is that in the richest country in the history of the world, it might be unethical to say you can be as healthy as you can afford to be to a person, right? I think I agree with that, actually. In principle, I agree with that, because I think individuals and the churches and all this other stuff should be taking care of this problem. We should find a solution.
Well, that's how Catholic hospitals, were started. I mean, they were generally, a big part of them was community-based charities, right? So you had the wealthy people who could afford the health care supporting those institutions so that they could give health care to the poor people.
And those are popping up again now, actually. A couple of my buddies, there's like health care co-ops now, right?
Yeah, and health sharing ministries.
Yep. Very good things. But again, back to the point, me and this person that I would have considered my political enemy now agree on the fundamental. And the problem is, how do we get to a position where we're going to find a solution to it? That's the real problem.
I say, and this is great, and sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, but yeah, I think this is great, because what I try to do when I have a liberal on my show or have a conversation, at a bar or whatever with somebody that's completely on the other side of me, I try to get them to understand that most of us identify the same problems. Healthcare, like you said, being a perfect example of that. We both see a problem, but we have very different solutions or policies, that we believe, should be solving those problems. Much of the time, the left's go-to policy or solution is that the government or the state should be the solution. And that's where I fundamentally disagree, because, you look at in healthcare and health insurance and all that stuff has been my field for many years. You look at the actual data of what happens around the world where they have single payer health or, government run healthcare systems, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, our system also doesn't work, but our system doesn't work because we took the worst of both worlds. We have a pseudo single payer health system, really, because of the government's involvement in it and the lack of an actual free market, the lack of transparency, the lack of all of that. And then, you throw on top of that, because of our prosperity, we're also fat and unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think if you're having that conversation with a person on the left, make the statement, well, would you want a Trump government in charge of your health care permanently? And their obvious answer is going to be no, right?
Right.
And I think that's a reasonable answer, and it's the answer that anybody would give. Even a conservative should, frankly, give that answer, because you can't create these government institutions and expect them to always be managed appropriately. They are inefficient by nature, and
Right.
because the oversight process is difficult, and because the firing process is difficult, what tends to happen is just bloated bureaucracy over time, which raises costs and lowers benefits. That's how it works, right?
ACA, Obamacare did that very thing. It required and created a roll-up of all of these doctor groups, all of these hospitals. Everything became just a few powerful entities controlling it all. And what we need to, and we talked about it earlier, we needed a decentralized model. We need the doctors to be making the decision. We need to be paying for our own care on a first dollar basis to those doctors, not having a third party pay system.
I mean, a way to hold people accountable, right, for their work
That's
product.
Right.
Like there's a medical board that will hold a doctor accountable for their work product to some degree, right? But if there is a doctor down the street that's charging 20% more but getting far better outcomes, most people are going to go try to get that guy, right?
That's right.
That's a fair fucking market right there to me. And, again, the government just doesn't do anything well. So I think, have the conversation with these people. You kind of alluded to it before, but something I tell people all the time is just because you don't agree with somebody's solution to a problem doesn't mean a problem doesn't exist. And the follow on to that is, if you don't get involved and help solve this problem, if you're a church person or you are doing well in life and you're not doing something to help solve problems, if you're not talking to your neighbors and helping insulate your community from shit, then the government will show up. They will show up and solve that problem. But when the government shows up and nobody's got their hand out, they have no power. And so if you really believe in this stuff, if you really believe in conservative principles, your mission in life should be to help as many people as you possibly can, because that insulates us from government bullshit.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And a good way to end. We got to go. Tell everybody where they can find your show, The Bryce Eddy Show.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if you want to follow my social media stuff, you can go to my website, bryceeddy.com, BRYCEEDDY, and kind of find links to all of it. But my show can be found on Rumble, YouTube, although we're back to growing that channel again after we got disappeared in COVID. They didn't like what we were saying about that. You can follow me, Super Bryce Eddy, on Instagram, or Bryce Eddy1 on X, and see me get some brain damage arguing with people. Yeah, well, I enjoy it. So we'll see you there. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Yes, sir. And thank you all for listening. This has been Sid.